Hello, I wanted to talk through a presentation I did for a Teach Meet a couple of years ago about multiple choice questions and using them for formative assessment purposes in my classroom. Okay, firstly, have a little think about how often you use multiple choice questions in your class. Now, I now tend to use them regularly. Most lessons, I will ask a multiple choice question of my class, and I'm going to go through how I do this and why I do this. Firstly, I'm going to show you this quote from Dylan William. My main reason for using multiple choice questions is to find out what my students already know so that I can then progress from that rather than making assumptions and pitching my lesson to the wrong place. Multiple choice questions are a common tool for assessment in classrooms, but also in external assessments increasingly in the UK. I'm not going to ask you to answer this one, though as a mathematician I am itching to work it out. Advantages of multiple choice questions is that they're quick and easy to mark, and they give a good snapshot of learning. I'll talk particularly about diagnostic multiple choice questions, which seek not only to see if a student knows the answer, but also uses distractors, which is the term for plausible wrong answers, and common misconceptions as alternative answers, which help the teacher to diagnose mistakes and teach specifically to rectify these. Okay, to bring in the example I used back when I first did this, there was a World Cup going on, and this particular question does show my age because I do just about remember this from my school days. This is an example of a diagnostic multiple choice question. Bear in mind you would ask this question to a group of people who would have some specialist knowledge. It's not Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And you would expect to be either trying to assess a topic that you've just taught them or to see what they already know. Now, I am not claiming this is the best it could be, but I did do some research into answering this question, and I'd like to have a little look and see what you think. I'm going to contrast this now with a more standard multiple choice question that you might ask on the same topic, and you will see that the answers mean that it's much more easy to guess. So even if you have very little knowledge of the 1986 World Cup, with a bit of knowledge of sport and famous people, you would be able to work out this answer. So this wouldn't really test much prior knowledge. Back to the original question, you can see, I hope now, comparing it to the last one, that Gary Lineker is the correct answer. Maradona was on the winning Argentinian team in this World Cup, but he didn't win the Golden Boot. Carrecha was the runner-up, and Paolo Rossi won the Golden Boot in the previous World Cup in 1982. So all of these are plausible incorrect answers, and you would have to know what you were talking about in order to be able to answer this correctly. Now, this question is one that I'd more likely ask in my lessons about adding fractions. So the procedure for doing this would be I would put this on the board. I wouldn't give out many whiteboards necessarily or anything to my students for a short, quick understanding check question, although I might do for a longer winded question when I wanted to see their working. In this case, I want to know if they can add fractions because I want to be able to use this in another topic that I'm going to go on to. So I would ask them to consider in silence for a few minutes, and then I'd ask them to vote by holding up the number of fingers of the answer. So either 1 finger for A, 2 for B, 3 for C, 4 for D, just in front of them like this so that I get a quick snapshot. Once I counted down and they'd held their fingers up, I would have a scan of the classroom. So I might then talk through the question and refer them back to previous learning, or ask them to look back at their notes, or give some reminders about not being able to add fractions without a common denominator. And I may ask them to re-vote. Some of them may change their minds, and that's absolutely fine. I would then tell them the correct answers. We would discuss misconceptions and discuss why the plausible wrong answers, the distractors, are there and what misconceptions people could have. And sometimes I would ask students to explain their thinking. Usually by that point, I've reassured those who had already got the right answer, corrected those who hadn't got the right answer, and I know who needs any extra help if they still don't get it. I've got instant marking and feedback without having to write anything, and I can then go forward with my lesson. So if I've got most of them correct, I can then carry on with confidence. If I haven't, then I wouldn't want to go forward with a lesson because I would want to properly reteach and make sure that this knowledge was in place before I moved on. Hopefully a recap will sort that quickly rather than having to rethink anything. Okay, so writing multiple choice questions, there's just a couple of points which I've particularly picked up recently from a podcast with an examination writer from AQA Exam Board who is in charge of writing multiple choice questions for some of their exams. Firstly, it's a good idea to write the answers first. So think about what the answers could be rather than finding the question, knowing what the correct answer is and having to come up with things which are plausible wrong answers. That's much harder and you don't get as good distractor answers. Distractors must be both plausible and wrong. Now, this is harder than you think. So you do need to think about these and also make sure that there aren't two answers that could be correct. The use of negative words in questions can cause problems, so do be aware of that, although they could be used particularly to give extra challenge in a question. So if you're going to use not, think about why and how you're going to do that. A good tip is put it in bold. So for example, which of these is not an example of, but make sure the not is in bold so that students see that because it's very easily missed and then it can be very confusing. Be careful of unintended cues in answers. Sometimes the longest answer can be the correct answer because it's the one that the person who's written the question has put most thought into when writing it. So that's an unintended cue. Make sure that doesn't happen. So do go back and check afterwards. Questions tend to come in two formats. So think about maybe these when you're writing. There could be a question which is asked, the question mark at the end, and then a choice of answers. Also, a common type is a sentence completion type of question where the stem of the sentence is the start of the sentence, and then you need to choose the correct word or term to complete it. Okay, so the only technology I tend to use for these is this website, Craig Barton's Diagnostic Questions website. This photograph was taken a few years ago, and there are actually almost 50,000 questions now in all sorts of subjects, not only maths. There are lots and lots from other places, and it's a really good way of finding a very specific question on a particular concept that I need. And they have really good diagnostic answers to them, which is very helpful. Within the diagnostic questions and the ED website, there is also technology available for you to give students to answer these themselves online. And there is a huge amount of information about previous misconceptions and the most common misconceptions. And it also makes a really good CPD exercise. There is also technology available for automatically collecting and recording answers, for example, Plickers, and devices that you can use and other platforms such as Kahoot, although I am not a big fan of Kahoot because of the timed aspect of it. I think it's better to give proper thinking time. I want these to be as quick and hassle-free as possible, though, so at the moment I'm using fingers to answer questions is the easiest way I've found to do this. Further thoughts about these, there is a thought about using a confidence rating. The hypercorrection effect says that if you discover something is wrong that you were convinced was right, it is a more powerful learning experience when you are correcting yourself. So there is an argument for getting your students to confidence rate their answers when they give them. Think about how confident they were. I have heard of somebody who suggests placing a hand on the desk, so that if their hand is on the left side of the desk, they are low confidence with their answer. The right side of the desk would be a high confidence in their answer. This could also help maybe to spot guessing. I'd rather know if somebody guessed than if they did think that they were completely right. So this is something that needs to be explored further. So further reading and references, Robert and Elizabeth Björk have written a lot on memory and testing, and particularly diagnostic questions. And a good starting point for this is to listen to the Mr. Barton Maths podcast, which can be found on his website. Mr. Craig Barton's book is also very interesting and has a chapter on diagnostic questions. And Daisy Christodoulou writes on the subject as well. So I hope you found this helpful. And do come and contact me if you have any further questions. Thank you.